Good morning, everybody. Thank you for indulging me there. It wasn't until I properly looked at the schedule and realized I had like 20, 30 minutes to talk that I realized I was woefully underprepared. And so Pastor Victor inspired me with a video, and I have a slide deck that I'll bring up. Something that the video doesn't touch on. Well, actually, before I say that, I actually wanted to publicly say how proud and inspired I am of you, Pastor Victor and Pastor Sonny. I do this work professionally and have done it for the last 20 years in the private sector mostly and affordable sector. And it's really hard. And the learning that you all have is unbelievable, and sharing it to community and the willingness you all have to then take up that banner. I grew up as a member of the United Christian Missionary Baptist Church, where Pastor Leroy Haley was the pastor. And I remember about 15 years ago, I started talking to pastors at scale about the importance of redeveloping their land. And I could see, obviously, that populations were dwindling. The luster of the church has shifted. There was more of a need to reach people on the outside. I was watching what I think it's Rick Warren was doing, where his logic around converting folks. And I was like, man, we really need to start building housing. And 15 years ago, pastors looked at me like I was growing horns. And so I quickly said, this is not a hill I'm going to die on. And so folks will get there and catch up. And so to not only see folks there and leading is pretty special. So yeah, I'm really proud of that. So before I became a developer, I grew up in Watts, South Central area. I was the kid that many congregations tried to save. I was the worst type of kid too, because I'd show up as charming as I could be to Sunday school, vacation Bible school, every revival, just in it, and youth president, all these things. And at 16, the music stopped. And because I was also living in South LA with everything else that was around me. And one really beautiful and lucky thing happened, but probably folks didn't think as much so. My now 20-year-old daughter was born when I was about 17, conceived at 16, and who I'm immensely thankful for and proud of. But you'll see through my story is my North Star. And the other thing that happened was I was incarcerated. I was incarcerated at 16. And I had just got on a train, thought I was ditching and getting out the hood for a moment. I was frustrated. It was always hot where we grew up. I didn't understand why there were no trees. There's a reason why I call the company Treehouse. I lived my grandparents' street on 56 in Central, had a massive tree canopy, and he would tell me to build tree houses to escape the foolishness, and I would when I was younger. And then I went to another street in 51st and Compton, and then 92nd and Budlong, and just all over. And these places had no trees anywhere. I would see housing that I, as a kid, thought was subpar. If you get to know me, you will know I have very serious opinions about design and beauty and what the tapestry of our landscape should look like, and I'm pretty unrelenting. If you want to argue with me, then fight about design, just about anything else we can find commonality. And at 16, I was incarcerated, and I was like, whoa, what am I gonna do here? Luckily, my dad, up prior to that, about the time I was 11 years old, he had taught me how to plumb an entire house by myself. And by the time I was 16, I'd physically built a house, just about every component of the home. And so I had this in my back pocket, and I was sort of in this destitute place. I was just sentenced to 6 years, and I was like, whoa, I didn't even think you could do that to a kid. That's news to me. And while I was there, I was like, oh, I want to go to college. And there was no college, and so me and a group wrote Governor Schwarzenegger at the time and said, hey, we got this idea of creating a college dorm. And my simple belief was one of two things had to be true. Either black and brown people were factually somehow predestined to be immoral, or we had a system that was wildly unfair. Because the numbers that I was looking at in prison did not meet the numbers of our population. And if there was one thing I learned, it was high levels of math, and I said, this ain't mathing. And so I wrote the governor and said, I have a belief, it's not founded in any evidence, but if we created an environment where people could get a 2-year degree, I think people would take it, they would thrive. And he agreed and created this program with me while I was incarcerated. It started with 30 of us. Today, I think it serves about 30, 40,000 people inside prison. And folks are able to get 2 and 4 year degrees. I was one of the first graduates from that program, where I got an AA and an AS and any other thing they would give me. But then I came home and I got to come home. But that was my first, I share that story because that was my first time of community building. And it was in physical space. We literally initially started with 30 people. I said that all 30 of these people had to live like they were in college. They needed to be in the same space, the same dorm. We needed to think together, talk together, connect together, be on one sort of vibration. That was the first time I got to messing with stuff and build space. Then I came home, I went to Loyola Marymount School of Engineering and studied engineering. While there, I got to build, work on a bunch of projects. If you've ever been to Ace Hotel or the United Artists building in downtown LA, I think that was my second project that I owned and built. In Los Angeles, I've built hospitals, facilities, and underground parking, and a host of stuff. But it wasn't until I took a sabbatical because Roy Choi called me and said, I want to build this thing in Watts, and we need to build it in 2 months. I told investors we're going to build it in 2 months. And I said, oh, the building's there? And he said, no, it's one wall and dirt. And I said, why is there one wall? He said, well, we didn't want to end up having to put more parking. I was like, but we needed a whole new building. I said, got it. And I said, well, I've been building construction at scale, and the truth is we build about a floor a day. And so if I implement those same strategies for a smaller building, I think we could meet the 2-month timeline. And so I took a break and got to work on that project. How many of you have been to Alta Adams, the restaurant? So it's a beautiful restaurant, Alta Adams, Chef Keith Corbin. Chef Keith Corbin worked on our construction team as a laborer. That was his first job. From there, I was able to introduce him to Roy Choi. He then worked for Roy at Local in Watts, to which he went on to build his career as one of Los Angeles' greatest chefs after being incarcerated for 10 years. Now it's always on LA's top 100 restaurants, on and on. And I started seeing all this come together in my life, which was this nexus of community, built space, finance, and how all of the other developers that I was interacting with didn't care too much about community. They lived by one creed and one creed only, which was build it and they'll come. And I started to say, well, let me take a less cynical view at the developer and understand why the developer first and foremost believes that they are right, and why, secondly, does the community feel so afraid and scared of them. And that was a really compelling exercise for me, because as a developer, when I launched out to do it myself, which was Treehouse first building, I mean, it was a mess. Everything went wrong. Everything that you could think of. I was 40 feet underground, and I had to fire a contractor who threatened to sue me for millions of dollars. I had other contractors saying that because of this lawsuit, they had to charge me an additional $4 million. I was 28 years old. I had lawyers beating down my door. I had subcontractors who this contractor didn't pay. I had the city threatening lawsuits against me. And I was like, what the hell did I do? And that was after a year and a half trying to get the building approved. And I was like, man, if this is what developers have to deal with, it ain't that bad. If they are committing themselves to this type of foolishness. But people don't see that. People don't understand it. And more importantly, they don't understand what's in it for them. And there are developers that are incredibly extractive and have built systems to take. And so with that in mind, you saw what Treehouse is, and it continues to be. We built one in Koreatown where we worked with the mayor to house people that were unhoused. And I would tell people all the time is that Treehouse is a philosophy as much as it is a way of building. And that philosophy is human first. Because as robots get better, AI gets better, I welcome it, I enjoy it, quite honestly. But I enjoy it because I see it for what it is, and that is a tool, a really powerful tool. And the only thing of potential value in the future, I believe, is each other and connection. And if you look and you're a student of building, as I am, you could go back to neighborhoods in China. There's this great study that Harvard did on a neighborhood in China where they had one of the most vibrant communities around. They built all these apartments with these courtyards, and that's where people would come and hang out and connect. And then technology came along and you were able to get AC. And there went that community. There went that connection. You think about all of these points of convenience that people think they want, but then you don't think about what are you losing as a result of that. And there's so many of these examples throughout the world, throughout America. The La Plaza and the way the ancients built were for a reason. Many of our buildings, our pyramids, etc., were built in circles. Towns were built around circles all over the world. I think that was intentional. And so when I think about all my endeavors, whether it's Treehouse and now my current endeavor, it's always that the philosophy of humans connecting first will beat opulence. It will beat unit counts. I will think about how to create creative financing structures before I compromise the human spirit. And that's the responsibility that I feel I hold as a developer. in this city, and I take no shame I operate both in the market side as well as the public side, because both are important. The scale of capital that we need in our communities actually requires the private sector. The public sector does not move fast enough. It does not have enough capital. It could be catalytic, right? Churches could take chances the way modular, and that's really important. But if you want to uplift the entire community, you need a lot of money. And typically that's in the private sector. And so you saw the building. I'll stop there now. We'll walk through models. You saw the building on Roy Choi's movie or video, and that building is right across the street from Destination Crenshaw. And I had just built Hollywood, and Council President Marquise Harris and his team came to that building in Hollywood, and he saw it, and he walked through, and he sat down with me, and he said, "Hey, I got this vision for Destination Crenshaw, and the idea is to create space that will endure for generations, where our community could walk down the street and say, this is a Black neighborhood." Because up until that point, Leimert Park was a Black neighborhood in our minds and in our hearts. That's it. There was nothing. There wasn't even an Apollo studio like Harlem. There was none of that. It was just in our minds and in our hearts, as much as Inglewood is. And his idea of like, I want to anchor space here, and we need developers that are interested in actually anchoring in that space. That led me to go buy that building directly across the street from Destination Crenshaw, and said, this is a mission that's worth fighting for. Well, what I didn't know is that people started talking that I was there in Leimert Park, and they had heard stuff about me as a developer throughout the community. I'm sorry, can I have the water? And they would talk about different stuff with me about within the community, that, hey, I was this developer that did these things, blah, blah, blah. And one day, a group of merchants came to me on Degnan Boulevard. How many of you are familiar with Leimert Park? Been there? Great. So this won't be foreign. So Degnan Boulevard is the main drag of Leimert Park Village. And a group of merchants came to me and said, hey, this property is coming up for sale. They want to sell it for $6.5 million. The guy bought it for half $500,000. We're concerned that if a private developer buys it, we will be kicked out. And I said, well, the way math works, you were right. You will be kicked out. And that's not emotional. And I'm going to explain to you very simply. If they buy it for $6.5 million, that is going to calculate to about $80,000 to $100,000 in property taxes, of which I assume your rents collectively do not even scratch the surface, let alone deferred maintenance, let alone uplifting and fixing the building, on and on, and maybe making their money back one day. So you are correct. And they said, well, what could we do? What can we do? And at this time, I was talking to a number of partners. One was Pastor Eddie, and his dreams in uplifting a CDC throughout the community. And I was hearing all these models, and someone kept saying, land trust, land trust, land trust. And I had not built or done a land trust. I was a private sector guy. But the more I looked at it, the more I said, maybe a land trust works here, actually. And a land trust, if you know, churches actually have been using land trusts intentionally or unintentionally forever, right? Many of their parishioners who get older don't have people to pass land to, give it to the church, and and can lease the building, hold the land And the reason that's important is, quite honestly, there's a book I love. It's a history book, and it talks about America's democracy and our obsession with the new frontier. And the idea is that we have never stopped being imperialists and colonizers. The new frontier just happens to be domestically now in our East Side neighborhoods. And I would get frustrated with many of my colleagues and say, every time I hear one of you say an area is up and coming, you frustrate me because what you tell me is that this community didn't exist, that has been here, and that really bothers me. And so understanding that these areas were being pushed in a new frontier, and what happens in the new frontier being pushed is that the value of the land artificially increases for no good reason. Like, I don't know, if you go in Leimert Park, it's one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in Los Angeles, full stop. Beverly Hills, on and on. The lawns, everything's well manicured, but somehow it's devalued. It was the same neighborhood in Fairfax was built by the exact same developer. Leimert was built first, but somehow it's 50% less valuable. So that says anything other than like some arbitrary idea that this area is now more successful because of the people that are housing it, typically not people of color. It is now the land is more valuable. So this idea of a land trust, of holding that artificial value back from people and actually allowing for affordable housing, allowing for stuff like that to happen. And so we endeavored on this and said, look, we're gonna build a land trust to buy this block and let's see what's happening. I'm the chair of the board of that land trust. And we put together a group of folks and we said, look, our mission is pretty simple. We're gonna empower and uplift communities through real estate acquisition, self-governance, and small business development. And the reason for this is we saw the village as something that was wildly important for business, commerce, and you couldn't ignore the businesses. If you were the landowner, you couldn't ignore the land unless you, or you wouldn't have control to effectuate the businesses. So the group came together, all of the merchants, we raised the money and bought the building. I'm gonna skip through some of this stuff. After we bought the building, I almost sat there in tears because I was still doing my day job as Treehouse. I'm now the chair of this board, and I'm watching this building dilapidate, get worse. But more importantly, there's no foot traffic. People aren't actually coming to the area. And one of our greatest staples was Tony Jolly, who owns, at the time, Hot and Cool, now Aura. And he was like, I'm leaving. There was a leak and there was a rain. I was like, no. Eswan had just left. They thought they left because of us, when in truth, James was just tired. And I was like, I cannot take another bad press about us kicking someone out, because we didn't kick Eswan out and you can't be kicked out. And so I said, what would it look like? How about we just invest in you, our company? And he looked scared and skeptical. And I was like, whoa. And I remember watching Malcolm X a long time ago, where he had a speech about who taught you to hate yourself. And I was like, man, he's afraid that I might take from him when I just offered him an investment in his company. And that became a moment for me of like, oh, we need community healing. This isn't just community development or development of a building. And eventually he acquiesced to the investment, but the way he did was, I said, hey man, shake my hand, take the money. Maybe you'll pay it back, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll give me a deal, maybe you won't. But today, we're gonna do an exercise in building trust. And within a few months we built it, a few $100,000, no contract, nothing. And he went from $500 a day to averaging almost $3,500 a day. And he got it, he gave us a deal and it worked out. But the idea there was that we could build and invest in our small businesses in a way that were economically viable. I see them viable in any other parts of the city. Ours should as well. But some of that is good design. So this is that space that went from hot and cool, not well designed, that this is outdated. At the time it was 2000. They've climbed every day since. That's when I started talking to Pastor Eddie and said, man, I need you here. A church, a CDC needs to commit to this area. This is real economic development. Can you start investing alongside me? Because I can bring private sector capital, you could bring philanthropic capital, we can go raise both together, but I need you alongside me. We need to build community. That then, we relaunched Ride On, revamped it, one of the businesses. Then we brought in Plant Chica, who had gotten kicked out. We saw them on the front page of the LA Times, her and her husband and her son. And we said, actually, we have space, come here, we'll invest in you starting up. And that started little by little, a movement to revitalize an area. Sika, we said, well, we'll relaunch Sika and uplift them. That's what this space is for. Each of these tenants get 99-year leases, which means they could lend against them. They could rebuild their space and build wealth. And now our board said, it's time for us to build. We need office space here. So we're gonna build a second story. And as a board, we designed and started working toward that. These are just ideas and space. We do all the financials, hard hitting. Make sure all our projects pencil. We look at debt, we look at grant, we look at PRIs, we look at equity. You have a small development team. George Fothery, who won back Bruce's Beach. You have Robbie, who's the land trust CEO. Ariel was my first investment. If any of you need a contractor, they are a Black contractor and architect. They were my first personal investment. They've since built over 600 units for me and Hilltops and all the other spaces they've built. And then this is our board. We made our board up of a third in the community. A third of the board were all the merchants who were in the building. A third of the board were community members within a mile of the area. And a third of the board for us was real estate folks who could help. And they happened to all be within a mile of the area. And so collectively we build and make these decisions together. But that wasn't it. So then we said, well, there is no food in this community. And we need to build a grocery store. And how do we? We're watching all these small farms pop up. Where are they selling their food? Who are they distributing to? Where is their actual resiliency space to cool down and hang out? So then we got a site and we acquired, it was a 20,000 square foot site in Old Cleaners called Flair's Cleaners on Leimert Boulevard. And we got that site and said, look, we're gonna clean it up and we're gonna give this back to the community. And we're going to revamp the space. We're gonna turn it into a grocery store, a food hall, a space where young entrepreneurs could come, and actual garden space. This gives you ideas there. This is one of the buildings. This is all the wood we removed from the building. It's gonna be reclaimed. I am obsessed with nature, as I said before. It heals us. This is actual park space that we are building. We planted a total of 24 full-grown trees in an otherwise asphalt parking lot that sat dilapidated for 20 years. And this to us was yet another step, and that was in direct partnership with Pastor Eddie, where he came in with the first and pretty significant piece of capital. And as a CDC, he said, here's how much I can allocate toward grant money. Here's how much I can allocate, if you all don't know what PRIs are, program-related investments. And then there's something called MRIs, which are mission-related investments. And that's typically philanthropy's really big money. When they say we're a $2 billion organization, they're talking about their MRIs. That money normally goes to big fund managers and stuff like that, to BlackRocks, to others. That's normally where MRIs go. But now philanthropy is making a big turn, universities on, to say, actually, we'll start bringing some of our MRI money. If you could deliver us a 9 to 12% return, then we'll give you the money too and invest in our communities. And so we leverage all of this in addition to the tax credits and things that you all talked about. Just more. We took all the asphalt and repurposed it as planters. Food halls, blah, blah, blah. Let me get through all this. All this then made us look again. Now this is community labs. Made us look at, thank you. Look at Leimert Park as a whole. People kept asking me, Prophet, what are you focusing on? What are you focusing on? And I said, well, when the 3rd Street Promenade was remade, no one asked the developer what he was focusing on. He focused on the entire promenade because he saw its potential. When we talk about West Adams being taken over, no one asked West Adams what they were focusing on because he bought the entire street of Adams. When we talk about Inglewood, no one's asking the Kroenke family, what are they focusing on? They're focusing on world building is what they're focusing on. And when I look at Leimert Park, I answer the same way. I am world building, a world that our community will get to reap the benefits of for generations to come. And that's when I said I want to create a company that leverage private investment, public investment, and create a lab where the philosophies of communities and ideas can come and sit, and we could give this information freely to other people who want to build their communities. So that's what we did. We focus on real estate asset development, and we focus on community and hospitality development. We look at where the nexus of all this is: value-driven asset revitalization, tax and capital efficient structures, that's where the CDCs and other partnerships come in, community wealth and sustainable impact, economic growth and local entrepreneurship, and integrated hospitality, because you can't build these systems like we realized through Destination Crenshaw in a study there, that we were losing some crazy amount of money in the billions in the hospitality industry just as jobs, because we didn't have strong hospitality jobs near entertainment hubs. And so all those things meant we needed to invest in all of them. This takes a really big team and from all over the place, right? Eric, who smiling there, that guy was the chief of real estate for Sweet Greens that took them from 2 locations to 300 and an IPO. We look at these people, and I think Pastor Sonny, what he said meant a lot to me, which is look at the people around you and what their assets are that they could contribute. We look at these people and say, how can you actually uplift and give back to community? Everyone from Pastor Eddie, on and on. It takes a massive team. Leimert Park. And this is our structure. You can see it. So Community Labs is a private company. You see Partnership for LA Growth. That's Pastor Eddie's nonprofit. He then created Community Labs Leimert Park CDC. Together, we own an LLC called Leimert Park Labs. So this isn't, here's a little percentage and shell companies. No. Together, we own Leimert Park Labs. And everything I'm talking about downstream happens at Leimert Park Labs. Tomorrow, we're opening a new bookstore. James from S1 will be there to give love. where all the investments I talk about happen at Leimert Park Labs, and we partner with every organization. We looked across the entirety of Leimert Park and said, if I was building an entire city, what are all the things I'd need? Cultural programming, blah, 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 blah. And who are the partners that are already doing this work? And how do we bring capital to them versus keeping it for ourselves? And then we build out a plan for every asset. We take this as serious as anything else. We look at a map like anyone else would and say, how are we going to rebuild our communities? We look at what could go there. We have conversations with community, and we put real investment behind each one. We schedule them out. And again, we take this very serious. This is not just hard work and impact that could be weighted on. There's a serious sense of urgency. I talk softly because I hate hearing loud noises, but I wouldn't get in the way of us. This is a serious group. And this is the scale of capital we look at. And we don't shy from that. People turned out, they want to give bigger amounts of capital for a bigger vision. We look at all our cash flows. We be honest about where we'll lose money, where we won't. And that's us. And then you go, lastly, I'll run through this quick. You don't leave the small businesses aside. You say, look, if they got the X factor, which is they're cool, they're culturally relevant, they've been there, they uplift youth, all they need then is Z, which is money. Get them the money. Don't try and teach them new ways, and just get them the money. Our problem isn't we need a bunch of business development classes all the time. We need money. And I say that laughingly, but when I started my first company, I was, like I said, I was 27 when I went out to raise, and I had a good brother named Joe Green. He was Mark Zuckerberg's roommate, and he introduced me, and he was an early founder of Facebook, and he was one of my first partners, and he introduced me to something that I'll never forget, which is a group of his friends had both money and trust in each other. And he would call people and say, I want to introduce you to my partner, Prophet. Here's his story. Here's why I believe in him. Here's what I care about. And they didn't waste my time with, how do I see the future? Will this be economically viable against every single economic downturn? I don't know. I'm going to give you my best financial projections, but I don't control our macro economy. I didn't see COVID coming. I didn't see interest rates flying. I didn't see Trump's tariffs. I wish. I'd probably be really rich. And they didn't waste time with that. What they did is they invested at the speed of trust. And oftentimes we do not trust each other to invest in each other. We waste so much time trying to be smart, when the truth of the matter is, starting a business, building anything is ripe with failure. Is the person standing in front of you committed? I'm telling you, the two of you, I'd invest in all day. Like the idea that you hit roadblock and figured it out, that's worth investing in. And so think about that in the terms of our communities. And that's what we do with each entrepreneur. We go one by one. We look for their businesses, we look at their vision, and we say, well, we'll invest in you. What are you bringing to this community? And we bring capital to them.
It's good work, God.
And I think that is how you uplift community, more on our structure. And you see here, I want to move to Lagos, Nigeria, by the way, just fun fact. Y'all got me for another 5-10 years. But you see, community labs will one day, after Leimert, create Stockton labs and Lagos labs, and hopefully it goes on, far beyond me, and continue to share this work and uplift communities. And it takes a massive group. More of our folks. That's that.